What can I say? I'm certainly pleased to be chairing this meeting. I've had ties, as Mr. Tange has said, to Japan since 1963 when I was a professor on the Faculty of Economics at Keio University. And I think that almost everyone who has lived in Japan for any length of time leaves a little bit of themselves there. I certainly did. Today we're very honored to have Mr. Yoshio Terasawa speak on a topic of great interest. Mr. Tange has already told you, when we get these secrets, we're going to sell them right away to the Russians. Mr. Terasawa is a graduate of Waseda University. He graduated in 1954. Waseda, I should note, is a friendly rival of Keio University, from which Mr. Tsurumi also originates. And I've known Mr. Tsurumi since 1963 because that's when he was also at Keio, teaching as a young professor. Mr. Terasawa went on to the U.S. and became a Fulbright Scholar at the Wharton School of Finance and stayed in the U.S., I think, until 1959 when he returned to Japan and joined the Nomura Securities International Finance Department. In 1970, he became president of Nomura Securities International, which is headquartered in New York. The year before that, 1969, he became the first Japanese member of the Boston Stock Exchange. In 1971, the New York City Club honored him as being one of 7 foreign-born individuals who had done the most to give constructive help to the city of New York. In 1981, he became the first Japanese member of the New York Stock Exchange. And today, he is managing director of the parent company in Japan and also president of Nomura Securities International. He's a knowledgeable and brilliant man. I think we're going to enjoy this very much. Without further ado.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandler. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here tonight. As I came through the campus, I was reminded of the days I spent here back in 1958, although Dr. Chandler did not mention it in her kindly introduction. I was enrolled in the Columbia Business School in September 1958 and spent here 3 months studying until I was recalled to Tokyo by my company, Nomura Securities. I therefore consider myself a friend of the Columbia Business School, and I'm especially pleased to be here. Tonight, I would like to express my own views about Japanese style in decision-making. I begin by sharing with you the substance of an article which recently appeared in the Yomiuri Shimbun, which is Yomiuri newspaper, the largest circulated newspaper in Japan, 6 million papers daily. The writer of the article, Nobel Prize recipient Dr. Esaki, observes that in Japan, Japanese children are taught by their parents to say "hi" loudly and clearly whenever their parents or other adults speak to them. This "hi" can be translated as yes, but in this situation, it is somewhat vaguer. Japanese parents teach their children to say hi, much as Americans teach their children to say please and thank you. Learning to respond hi when spoken to is a part of learning good manners. To say hi loudly and clearly is a way of pleasing the listener. It expresses goodwill and avoids confrontation. It means something like, I hear you, where I understand you. That's about it. I'm sure this expression seems quite vague to Americans. I believe the use of the response hi contrasts with what goes on in a Westerner's mind under similar circumstances. A Westerner's answer would most likely indicate, yes, I will, or no, I won't. It is often said the history of the West is a history of confrontation. And this may have something to do with it. As Mr. Esaki points out in his article, when Europeans or Americans negotiate, they are careful not to say yes or no until they are ready to commit themselves. They make no response of yes until they really understand and agree to do what they are promising, even if by asking questions they will inconvenience or even embarrass the other party involved. In Japan, of course, we don't make promises unless we understand what the content of the promise is. But one tries very hard not to hurt the other's feelings. So we say hi over and over again in negotiations and try to avoid saying iie, which usually translates no. The Japanese language may be a beautiful language from the literary or poetic point of view, but it is certainly not an exact language from the viewpoint of law or business, because there are so many parts of an idea left out of the spoken or written sentence. For example, in English, one says, quote, I go to school. In Japanese, we would say this, quote, go to school, which the subject I understood. Also, in Japanese, we rarely distinguish between the singular and plural. For example, we would say have a horse to mean I have a horse, or to mean I have some horses. Even if we mean 200 horses, it would sound the same as if we only meant one horse. We also don't distinguish between Miss, Mrs., and Mr. Therefore, I am Terasawa-san, as is my wife, and as is my daughter, who is here somewhere, and so on. As you know, in Japan, 120 million people live in a small land area. As a matter of fact, it is only about the same land area as 30% of the American state of California. The whole country of Japan is usually considered to be about the same size as California. But about 70% of it is not used for habitation because it is so mountainous. So it is as if half the population of the United States suddenly had to jump into 30% of the state of California. That is how crowded it is. Since we are so crowded, it is important for us to get along. This is made easier, as you probably know, because we Japanese are extraordinarily homogeneous. The country was isolated from the outside world for approximately 200 years until 1853, when it was opened by Commodore Perry. With such ethnic and linguistic homogeneity and the history of being somewhat culturally isolated from the rest of the world, perhaps it is not too surprising that Japanese people tend to understand each other very easily, and that we do not have to explain ourselves to each other as much as we need to explain ourselves to non-Japanese. Japanese people understand each other well, in much the same way that members of a close family often understand each other without long-winded explanations. So as long as Japanese people are in Japan, they live quite happily, saying such things as go to school, have horse, 寺澤さん, hi, hi. The problem comes when they have to talk to non-Japanese. In the past, communications problems have caused serious misunderstanding in diplomatic relations between Japan and the United States. According to a Japanese newspaper analysis, the conflict over textile importation from Japan to the United States 15, 16 years ago originated in a terrific misunderstanding about yes, the word YES, which the Japanese Prime Minister said to the United States President. The President interpreted yes as okay, while the Japanese Prime Minister meant only, yes, I have understood you. Actually, the Prime Minister had not given a substantive answer at all. Then the argument started. You told me yes, with a reply being, I told you we would consider it, when neither side was acting in bad faith. These days, problems like this are encountered in business dealings. When, for instance, an American businessman first goes to Tokyo, he is, with very little exceptions, quite satisfied with that he finds there. He's happy staying at the Okura Hotel. He's gratified by the punctuality and serious approach to business of the Japanese. All in all, he begins to think that the Japanese are much less mysterious than he had imagined. The Japanese look and act intelligent, and everyone says yes to him in a loud, clear voice. However, when the businessman wants to close a deal, he feels more frustration. He has taken it for granted that since he explained himself quite clearly to his Japanese counterparts, he will receive an answer that is either yes or no, one way or the other. But instead, he gets the answer, yes, I understand what you have been saying, and we will consider your proposal. He's not sure what this means, and he is not at all sure when he will get a real answer. A flat no, N-O, is something Japanese people don't like to say. You may wonder how then Japanese people can do business even among themselves. Well, we can. And not just by using, yes, we have no bananas. If a Japanese businessman tells me, yes, I will consider it, I know that 95 times of 100, this means no. Well, I have talked enough about the Japanese language. I'm telling you about the vagueness of the language because it can cause problems in business negotiations between Japanese and American or Europeans in decision-making, in other words. To come back at the topic of decision-making from another angle, let me give you an example. I go to Tokyo very often, and I stay there a couple of weeks at a time. On the way back, I board Panama from Nairobi whether I want coffee or tea. I'm aware that right off the bat, I am expected to make an arbitrary decision. I realize that I have to reaccustom myself to making decisions American style. Even when I go out for a relaxing dinner at a favorite restaurant in New York, I may have to make at least 15 or more decisions. What kind of cocktail? Olive or twist? On the rocks or straight up? Then I must choose appetizer, soup, salad with Italian, Russian, blue cheese or house dressing, red wine or white, French, Italian or California, Indian. And how would I like my steak done? Butter or sour cream on the potato? And what vegetables would you like? Dessert, coffee, tea, after dinner drink. Frankly, we Japanese find all this decision making quite exhausting. A friend of mine whose English is good, but not perfect, always orders hamburgers in the United States. It is not that he likes hamburgers that much, but in ordering fast food, he avoids making all those tiresome decisions. Somehow or another, in Japan, we don't have to keep telling people we want it, this, that. I go to a restaurant or tea house in Japan. they bring me what is particularly good that day, prepared so that it is especially delicious. If it doesn't satisfy me, I just never go there again. Whereas Americans as individuals seem to relish instant decision-making, Japanese prefer to take their time and to consult with many others when a decision must be made. Decision-making Japanese style is a slow process. Our companies are usually not organized in such a way that there is a single individual responsible for any given area of expertise. When an American businessman visits the Japanese company, let's say to buy something this time, he expects that there will be a right person within the organization with whom it would be natural for him to deal. But he finds to his annoyance that it takes quite a while just to figure out who he actually should be talking to. When a meeting is eventually set up, he may find himself speaking a dozen people. However, only one, an elderly gentleman, says anything. The rest just sit and take notes. So American does not feel at all reassured. The business talk does not exactly go as it goes for him in New York. But what is causing the trouble here is not simply a language barrier. If American later asks a Japanese friend, why the heck do the Japanese do business like this? The Japanese would feel as if he had been asked, why is there a Mount Fuji in Japan? From the Japanese point of view, people have been doing business this way for the last several hundred years. They don't understand why the American who flew in from New York just yesterday and hasn't even recovered from jet lag is in such a hurry to close the deal right here and right now. They don't understand why he gets so frustrated. Despite our Americans' attempts to find him, there is no one in the company who can make a decision, business decision, by himself. Not even the chairman. Of course, the chairman is powerful even in Japan. And let's say I will have life more difficult for me if he dislikes me. But neither the chairman nor the president is chief executive officer in the American sense, because the decision is made by a group of people, not by any individual person. This is one reason it takes more time than in the United States to come to the decision. However, I wonder how fast the matter is executed once the decision is made in this country. Generally speaking, it takes more time to reach a final decision in Japan, but once the decision is made, things get done quite quickly. If one compares the whole process from the beginning of the negotiation to the completion of the task at hand, let's say to make things simple, if the project requires 1 year, in the United States, the decision could be made in 2 months, but the implementation could take 10 months. Whereas in Japan, the decision-making might take 10 months, but the execution would only require 2 months. Of course, I'm exaggerating. But the point is that decision-making is slow because it must involve many people. This contrasts with the individualistic decision-making style characteristics of the United States, where confrontation is a way of life. For example, my kids are being raised in the United States. They are Japanese nationals, but they are being raised over here. For them, I is a very important word. Daddy, I didn't do it. My son insists that he didn't make the mess. Of course, I don't mean to say that in Japan, Japanese kids don't try to get out of things. But what the parents want to hear from child is that the mess will be cleaned up, regardless of who is responsible. The parent just wants the place cleaned up without hearing a legal argument. Cooperation in a Japanese company is rather like this. Everyone pitches in when necessary without quibbling over my job description or your department's project. As you probably know, this kind of cooperative spirit is reinforced by the conventions of Japanese company life. The people who take jobs in large corporations, large prestigious corporations such as Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, Mitsui, or Sony, etc., usually stay there until retirement. So the employees get very good at working together. The company provides housing, healthcare, transportation allowance, etc., complete with a big picnic outing several times a year. So the people one works with are not just one's workmates. It is more like cooperating with one's friends and neighbors. I'm always struck by the contrast between Japan and the United States on this point. In the United States, on weekends, social life usually revolves around family and friends, and more often than not is unrelated to one job. In Japan, we, male co-workers, tend to see a great deal of each other, both on and off the job. For example, when I was young, 35 years old, I occasionally get a call from a friend of mine in a different department of Nomura Securities Tokyo. He would like to play mahjong or go drinking together with 3 or 4 other Nomura colleagues. I would always accept even if I had made previous plans to go out with an old friend whom I had known since college. It was much safer in terms of my career to accept the company's friend's offer and apologize to my old friend. When this happens several times, naturally, one loses touch with old friends from outside the company. To emphasize how far this habit of socializing with one's workmates is carried, let me mention that between a quarter and 1/3 of all Nomura executives are now married to women who at one time or another worked for Nomura. We have a matchmaker who is a retired executive and another who is a retired company nurse. They keep huge files of all the single Nomura employees, listing their hobbies and so forth, and try to make suitable matches within the company. The point I wish to make here is that the destinies of all the regular employees of large companies are bound up with the fate of the company. Everyone is affected by big decisions, so everyone is consulted and given a chance to express an opinion. Obviously, not even Japanese companies can please all of the employees all the time. But even when an employee does not agree with a given decision, he knows that other decisions will accord with his wishes. He has faith that the company is being run by capable people whom he feels he knows and likes, and that ultimately company decisions are made within his welfare in mind. To put it simply, it is clear to see that such harmonious decision-making can be done in Japan. There is naturally a cultural, sociological base to all this. I'm not suggesting to you that if you import this way of decision-making, you can be a success. Of course, it may be possible to learn and take a part of it when it can be applied in this country or elsewhere. But there is no shortcut. There's no shortcut. I know there are many books written by professors and other experts about Japanese management. I cannot say anything about these books because I haven't read any of them. But these seems to me the idea in this country that the Japanese ability to make such beautiful cars and audio equipment is due to something that we don't know about, some hidden secret. I think there is one very, very simple thing which everybody can understand, but which may not be easy to come by. It is trust. T-R-U-S-T is the secret key. Trust between employer and employees, between husband and wife, parent and child, trust between teacher and student, between salesman and customers, trust between the government and the private sector. That's what we need. Thank you very much.